Hi, welcome to the Lead Green Associate Exam Preparation and Training. I'm Chris Taylor, and I'm going to be taking you through a whole swath of information getting ready to prepare you for this exam, this first tier exam on your way to becoming a Lead AP. And what I want to talk to you about is just kind of an overview of the U.S. Green Building Council, the LEED standard, and just what you'll need to know to prepare you for this exam. So just starting with the U.S. Green Building Council, the USGBC, it's a non-profit organization, even though it's a little deceiving because you see that it's in Washington, D.C. It's called the U.S. Green Building Council, and so we automatically think, oh, this is a government agency. But the reality is it's a non-profit. And their goal is really to transform the building industry and make it greener. And we'll talk about what greener means in just a sec. So the USGBC membership also has grown quite a bit in the last several years. When the organization first started and the first intentions of building green began, that was about 1994 or so. And it took several years before people really became interested in becoming a member of the USGBC. And so membership was a little slow in growth until about 2000. Around 2000, this is when the first LEED projects actually came to be. So the USGBC had worked on this standard for green buildings called LEED, or Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And by 2000, it was out and it was being applied to buildings. And so since about 2000, there's been explosive growth, and there's over 67 actual chapters of the USGBC throughout the country. So it's not just something isolated in DC or in the green belts, as we'd call them, like California or the Pacific Northwest. It really is spread across the country. So why build green? What's the point? Why did the USGBC come together in the first place? What is their intention? And so just in case you didn't know, in terms of CO2 emissions, these are the emissions associated with global warming. We hear about climate change. CO2 emissions are what are known as greenhouse gases. And so in terms of these greenhouse gas emissions, buildings are actually the #1 emitter. And most people, when they think about greenhouse gases, they automatically think about cars. Take the bus, take a walk, drive a hybrid. These are the ways you reduce greenhouse gas emissions. While that's true, the biggest dent in greenhouse gas emissions reduction can be made with buildings. And most of that has to do with electricity use. You can see there, in terms of different impacts from buildings, 72% of all U.S. electricity consumption is from buildings. And when you realize that most of that electricity consumption is derived from coal, on a nationwide basis at least, then you can see the CO2 emissions associated with that coal burning is what contributes then to the high level of CO2 emissions from the buildings themselves that are using so much electricity derived from that coal. So things like energy use, CO2 emissions, water use, and also solid waste reduction, these can all be improved by building in what's known as a greener method. 40% water reduction is not that unrealistic. I worked on several projects that attain these points in LEED for water reduction, and 40% reduction is not something that's unattainable. I mean, even with just a few fixtures outlaid, it's very easy to do. You don't need gray water systems or rainwater capturing or other sophisticated systems that we'll talk about later to achieve this kind of reduction. It's just a matter of some low flow fixtures, and you can really get there. So what is a green building? Now we understand why to build green. It makes sense to reduce the impact on the environment. But what is a green building? And in my opinion, I think it's a balance of a couple of things. One being best practices, and the other being the integrated process. Really, green building sounds like a noun, it sounds like a thing, but the reality is green building is a process. You either build in a green way or you don't. And so green building is about integrating the process and using best practices in that process to create a building from the outset that employs a lot of upfront thinking in terms of efficiency, not waiting till we get there and then saying, oh, we could have saved money here, we could have saved energy there, but really proactively finding ways to improve efficiency along the way. And so in the traditional building industry, typically you have an owner or someone that has an idea. They give these ideas to the architects who design several designs. They pick one of these designs, and the architect is priding themselves on creating whatever it is that the owner or whoever wants to create, and then that's given to engineers to fit systems into it, who pride themselves on, hey, you give us a design and we'll make it work. We'll make a system work We'll make sure you have air conditioning and heat and everything else, and we'll make it work. Then it goes to a contractor who prides themselves on saying, here's our designs. Well, we're going to build this. We're going to make it happen. And so there's numerous opportunities to improve efficiency along the way, but they don't typically happen. With the integrated design process in building greener, what we do is try to get this design team together in the very beginning to discuss possibilities of improving efficiencies and eliminating unnecessary steps, unnecessary costs, unnecessary amounts of energy use along the way. So you could have an architect and an owner in the same room making assumptions about each other, and the architect might limit their design based on their assumptions about the owner, and the owner might limit their request based on assumptions about the architect, and so on and so forth. So when we get into a room and we can get into a space where we can eliminate these assumptions, we can really get moving to a more ideal building according to what the owners want, what the designers can create, what the engineers can produce systems for, and what contractors can actually make happen.